To introduce Nyetimber, I think it's worth introducing the estate, which is this beautiful place down in West Chiltington, in West Sussex. Nyetimber, the wine, takes its name after the Nyetimber estate. And although we don't know exactly how it came to be known as Nyetimber, it has been as such for nearly 1,000 years. So the property was first mentioned in the Doomsday Book of 1086. In the language of the time, it was Nyetimbraha, meaning newly timbered. So our best guess was that it refers to the property may have been used for forestry. Along the way, it's had some notable owners, including Henry VIII, who took possession of the estate along with some neighboring properties in 1536. We can guess that Nyetimber was a little bit special for the king because he gifted it, first of all, to Thomas Cromwell, his #1 advisor, while Cromwell was his #1 man. When that ended, he made another special gesture, giving Nyetimber to Anne of Cleves, the king's fourth wife. She received Nyetimber as part of the settlement package for the annulment of their marriage. As a vineyard, we have to shift quite a bit forward, another 500 years from there to 1988. That's when an American couple that owned the property at the time, Stuart and Sandy Moss, had the idea to plant Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier grapevines and to produce traditional method sparkling wines. And that's really the first time that had been done, those grapes and that singular focus on traditional method sparkling in England. So a pioneering move that set us off on the track to where we are today. However, in wine terms, the biggest step forward for Nyetimber was in 2006. That's when this man, Eric Harima, took over the Nyetimber estate. Eric is as passionate about wine as anybody that I've ever met. And he could see that there was some unfulfilled potential, both in terms of Nyetimber, but also in terms of English wine in general. And from his arrival onto the scene at Nyetimber in 2006, began a transformation towards where we are today.
So then the story of Brad and I begins, where one of the things that Eric Harima recognized was that, you know, as a wine business, it's really important to have fully qualified winemakers full-time there to, you know, be meticulously taking care of everything. And so we were very fortunate that ended up as Brad and myself, who joined the company in February 2007. Now, our story of how we came to Nyetimber is a little bit longer, so I'll just tell you the whole story. Basically, so Brad and I originally met in our undergraduate university studies in Canada, where we were both born and raised in Canada. And Brad's parents at that time, when, you know, young girl goes to meet the parents, it's a big deal. And one of the things that I really remember from my early visits with Brad's parents was that they had this beautiful tradition that on Friday nights they would get home from work, and, you know, it was pre-cell phone days, and they wouldn't turn the TV on, not answer the phone, and just open a nice bottle of wine with some bits of food and share and talk about their week, which was just this really relaxed, lovely thing. And, you know, they loved wine, but they weren't super knowledgeable. They just really, you know, they had wines that they liked and things that they liked, but that was enough. And that was great. But it kind of got under our skin as to wanting to know more. Like, yeah, we liked the drink, but it was so interesting to learn more. So started reading about wine, and yeah, you know, it was early days of the internet, but I remember going on the internet and finding out there's different grapes in wine, and how amazing is that? And meanwhile, we finished university. Brad went to do an internship at a science institute in Switzerland, and I went to visit him from Canada one autumn. And I realized when we were there, I was like, hey, hang on a second, it's autumn, it's harvest time, so they must be bringing the grapes in. And we were, you know, a stone's throw away from Burgundy. So we jumped on the train, went to Burgundy, saw these grapes coming in, and at that time we were thinking about further education in science, in master's or PhD, and I remember joking to Brad, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we could do a PhD in wine? Little knowing actually you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Brad's mom actually sent us a newspaper clipping of a wine research institute that had opened up in Vancouver, Canada. So when we went back to Canada, we went to check this place out, and the professor there, well, it didn't take very long to convince us that we should become students at this wine research center. So we did, and we completed a master's degree in science at this wine research center, top level wine science that you can imagine.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
What was always a struggle for me, and why I actually was one of those people going through university, not sure what I was going to do, because for me particularly, I loved science, but I was also trained in classical music, and I always had this sort of, I need some kind of artistic element in my life. So
Oh, yeah.
I realized when we were at this wine research center that actually I'd like to make wine, not just study it. So we were able to go to Adelaide University after that and having had all that science already, we'd done a lot of education, we were able to create, to finish our enology degrees in 1 year down in Australia. So yeah, it's taken us around the world. Meanwhile, I mentioned my father is from England. He was born in Cambridge, and mum and dad lived and raised me in Canada, but he always loved to visit. And on one visit that my parents made to England, they asked if they can bring us back anything, and we said, yeah, we'd like to try this thing called Nyetimber. So they brought 2 bottles of Nyetimber back for us, and we sat down one night many years ago to taste the wine, and we both went, wow, you know, this is not perfect, but there's so much potential that we can see in this sparkling wine that we haven't seen in sparkling wine from anywhere else in the world except Champagne. Okay. So that memory stuck in our mind, because then in sort of early 2007, when we were actually thinking we would end up as winemakers in Canada and looking at job opportunities there, we were out for a walk one night, and Brad said to me, why don't we apply to dream jobs, things that we think we're never going to do? And the first thing that entered my head was Nyetimber. I want to make sparkling wine in England. And so we wrote info@nyetimber.com, as simple as that, and said, hey, we're 2 young winemakers. Can you tell us, is there enough of an industry in England to warrant moving there and looking for work? And I got an email back saying, actually, our CEO is looking for 2 fully qualified winemakers as we speak, so send your CVs. And a few phone call interviews later, the rest was history, and away we went and started working with Eric in February of 2007. So over 13 years later, it's pretty incredible that it is still very much a dream job for us.
Does it feel like it's passed quite quickly, the 13 years?
Oh, yes.
Actually, we were out in the vineyard today, actually. We were visiting Tillington Vineyard, and that was a site planted in 2006. And we both had the same sort of reaction. I don't know why it particularly stood out today, but yeah, all of a sudden these vines are now 14 years old, you know, very mature, big, thick trunks. And we were both just sort of looked at each other like, don't you remember when they used to be just, you know, little twigs? They're all grown up now. Yeah, so time flies.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's amazing to see that. And that could just sort of highlights for us just how fast time goes. And you know, there's so much going on at Nyetimber and what we do, and just, you know, the time flies. It's such an amazing place to work, so we love it.
How do you think, because obviously the last, it will be 3 summers now at the end of this season, have all been quite extraordinary. How are things looking at Nyetimber?
We're in a very good stretch, actually. I mean, with some challenges. So 18 was wonderful by almost every measure viticulturally. So ripe, delicious grapes and plentiful supply as well. Everyone in England had quite good yields. 19 was a good English vintage, but with some challenges, I would say. So you had to work hard and stay on your toes to make a success of it. But the end wines, which you just finished bottling a couple weeks ago, we're really happy with. 2020 is tracking well, but started slightly, with a disappointing event that we all had some frost in the spring. So yields are going to be lower than they should be in England again, but quality-wise, things are on a very good track. It's just a shame that with this much heat and sunshine that we've had, the vines could carry and ripen a bigger crop.
Yeah.
That's not available to us. So
we'll have to wait and see, won't we? As you say, but less at higher quality is a good thing in some respects.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the reflecting on the past 13 years, here's a really nice milestone when we think back to the way Nyetimber was when we first joined and met with Eric. It was all about potential and what could be possible. We all believed, and still to this day, that England is the best place to be making traditional methods sparkling wines. But yeah, as I said, back then it was a matter of rolling up our sleeves and getting the work done. And yeah, it was all ideas and things that we had to do. But a really nice acknowledgement of some of the work that's gone into it was in 2018. I think I remember talking to you about this news actually at the time, but that.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
The Cherie was awarded Sparkling Winemaker of the Year at the International Wine Challenge, and it was the first time that they'd given this award to a winemaker from outside of France, outside of Champagne even specifically, and also the first woman to win the award when they gave it to Cherie. So
it's a few firsts, Cherie.
It's an amazing, amazing accomplishment when we think of, the work by everyone here that had to go into making this possible, but also that for all the countries in the world that are making sparkling wine and have been doing so, most of them for a lot longer than England, that England was the first one to displace Champagne from the top step, really is I think a significant endorsement of the potential that we think is coming to pass for this country.
I think, as you say, it's important to note with that there have been lots of other wine regions around the world that have been producing sparkling wine for some time, and yet it's an English sparkling wine that managed to top Champagne, as it were. So no, it's big news, absolutely.
Yeah. So just to kind of round off the background knowledge for Nyetimber, I think it's always worth saying that at Nyetimber, we only make sparkling wine. There's no still wine made. We only use the traditional method for that sparkling wine, and we only use the 3 grape varieties, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay, as have traditionally been found in Champagne. In the southeast of England, there are a variety of soil types. The 2 soil types we choose for our vineyards are green sand and chalk. We are fastidious in only using fruit in the Nyetimber wines from the vineyards that we own. And that means every single vineyard that we have gone and sourced ourselves. And there's a variety of criteria we specify in what we want for vineyard land, but green sand and chalk soils are fundamental. At this stage, we're planted in 3 different counties: West Sussex, Hampshire, and Kent in the south east of England. There is a total of 11 vineyards and 327 hectares under vine, of which some are young vines. So in 2020, we'll be producing from 260 hectares.
Okay.
And just to zoom in a little bit on that, so there's the 2 sites in Hampshire, 3 sites in Kent, and the remainder in West Sussex. Interestingly, we have chalk sites in all 3 counties, and the green sand sites that we have are all in West Sussex. So it's just a fun little fact that's not by design as such, just a coincidence. We always say that grapevines don't know what county they're in. They know their microclimate and the soils and the elevation and the aspect, but just for ease of other people's reference, knowing where they are roughly for those 3 counties is helpful to share.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Shall we try some wines?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. So it's always great to start with the classic cuvee, our classic wine, as it were. And I'm guessing, Guy, you're going to need to open yours, right? Or have you already got them all?
I have everything open. I just need to pour. So
okay, great. Give me one. I'll be slightly behind you. I've got to open one here.
Would you mind, Guy, if you could share on your bottle of Classic Cuvée the lot code from the back, and then we'll be able to look at we can look it up together. So on the bottom left of the label should start L.
Want me to read it out, or do you want me to share it to you?
If you don't mind to read it out, so it should be LCCMV and then.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, LCCMV 0602.
Yeah.
112.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Great. Yep. It's an I-12 at the end, but yeah. So
let me off.
So Brad's just going to pull up some information. While he's doing that, I'll just briefly tell you, the basics of Classic Cuvée. So Classic Cuvée for us, the name denotes that the reason it's called Classic Cuvée is because we use the 3 classic grape varieties, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier in the blend. The name Classic Cuvée, Nyetimber was the first to use that name back with the first edition in 1993. And it's not a regulated name in any way, but there are a variety of other English producers now who have adopted the name, which is great. And mostly people mean the same thing. It's a blend of these 3 classic grape varieties. Arguably, this is the wine that Nyetimber is most known for. It does constitute the majority of our of what we make, and it's certainly fair to say that as the winemakers, Brad and I work very, very hard on this wine because we know it's what leads the way for Nyetimber in most avenues in most settings. So it's very important that the quality tier on this wine remains very, very high. It's something that we spend a lot of time on. It's what we call...
it's what you represent yourself. Sorry, Cherie, go on.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Guy. Go right ahead.
No, what I was going to say was, a classic cuvee for any brand is a very important wine because it's how you will represent yourself. With what I was saying, it's a staple. That underplays it, but it's probably one of the most important wines that a vineyard or winemaker can have because it says so much about the brand.
It does the job of first impressions, most of the time for us. So it needs to be on point. I think sometimes people talk about it as our entry level wine because you taste it first and things like that. My shoulders normally go up around my ears because it's not meant to be an introduction to Nyetimber, but more like you say, represent Nyetimber.
Yeah, very much so. And some wineries would have a different philosophy. They might say, that's just our entry level, but they mean it in a slightly lesser way. But That's not the case for us. It's and we can come on to more about how and why we do that, but it's just important to know. It's an important wine for us. This is a wine where we choose to make this as a multi-vintage wine, and we're very particular about saying multi-vintage rather than what is more previously used in the champagne industry as a non-vintage. And I'm just gonna share with you a little bugbear of mine that I really feel it's important that we in the industry make clear multi-vintage versus non-vintage, because a multi-vintage wine, and the reason we call it a multi-vintage wine is because it's been made from grapes that come from multiple different vintages, years, in which the grapes were harvested. Now, non-vintage can mean that, but non-vintage can also mean a wine that was made from 1 year and has no other vintages in it, and they've labeled it as a non-vintage wine, typically based on a quality tier differentiation. And I think that's not always understood. Sometimes people assume that all non-vintage wines have these reserve wines, these extra years in it, and that's not the case. And it's fundamentally different in the qualitative approach when you do one versus the other. So yeah, sorry for my little rant there, but
actually, it's,
on that note, so if you've got as you say, your base wine is much more of a spread of vintages, I presume, I mean, you'll have to correct me here, which way, does that make it harder or easier to achieve a good standard cuvee? You say that is going to be, because the purpose of the standard cuvee is this is the representation of the brand, this is their minimum, and I don't mean minimum as in low, but this is where we position ourselves. Do you think it's harder having such a wide spread, or it's better to have a uniform taste?
I love your question, Guy, and I wish more people would ask this. I actually think the answer isn't super black and white. It's kind of a bit of both, where in the respect that using multiple vintages creates, per definition, I mean, you can't escape the fact that almost mathematically, you get a kind of an averaging. So from that simplistic point of view, yes, it can help create a consistency in the wine, which is, one might say, well, that makes it easier. But then when you get into the details of that, no, it's actually harder for a variety of reasons. One, you have to put a lot of care and diligence into the care of your reserve wines, because you can keep reserve wines, but if you don't do it well, then all you're doing is making everything worse. So that's not helpful. You also have a lot more material that you're working with at the time of blending. So in some respects, that's easier because you've got lots of choices, but you know, the whole thing about sometimes you've got so many choices that it makes it tricky to kind of keep your eye on stuff. So it's not a super black and white answer, but there's elements of both. What I can tell you is I wouldn't do it any other way. I think for what the classic cuvee has always been at Nyetimber is this wine that is a blend, and the point is that the parts, when you bring them together, create something better than the individual bits alone. And I think the multi-vintage way of working for that is an important piece of the puzzle of really making that philosophical view about that type of wine come true. So I wouldn't choose with our classic cuvee to do anything else. Now, we've spoken all about these different reserves. What Brad was pulling up while we were chatting was one of the things, we like to be quite transparent as much as we can for our wines. So the lot code on the back of the bottle, we can enter that onto our webpage, into the nyetimber.com webpage /wine info. And it gives you a screen like this, where we show you exactly the grape varieties that are in the blend, and also the breakdown of the different years that are in the wine. So this is the lot code from your bottle guide. So the one you've got in your glass now is predominantly from 2015, and then 20% reserves going back to 2009.
Wow, okay.
We do also share for all of our wines the bottling date, the riddling date, and the disgorging date. And that's, again, to bring just a level of transparency about how we work. So someone really knows how long the wine has had on lees, how long it's had on point, how long post-disgorgement. And that's done for every individual bottle. So it's a challenge for us to do it, but we feel it's important.
It's sort of a charming aspect of the traditional method wines, that these are production steps, bottling, riddling, and disgorging, but each one, and particularly how they relate to one another, have an influence on the ultimate style of the wine. So you can look at those dates and understand a little bit more about what you're tasting. But also, I think even more on the charming side is that, that traditional method is bottle fermentation. It's bottle by bottle. So those dates apply to the one that you're holding in your hand, and the next one that you try could be. I mean, it's not going to be dramatically different, but might be a little bit different, and you might even be able to perceive.
That's wine, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I mean, that's wine. Wine it literally is alive in the bottle, isn't it? It is an evolving process.
Yeah.
It's an interesting tack you guys have put on that for people to identify.
Yeah. And not everyone wants that. They just want the classic cuvee to drink, and that's enough, and that's fine. So it's available for the, I always say affectionately, Brad and I are a bit geeky about wine, so we are pretty sure other people are too. And if you want that information, you can get it, and there's no secret.
Oh, absolutely.
So in all of this talking, Guy, I don't know if you had a chance to taste, but just from our perspective, what we really hope you find in the wine is a lovely freshness of fruit, but also, since the wine has around 3 years lees aging before release, that it also has those wonderful complexing flavors that you get from the yeast aging process, vanilla flavors, for example.
No, I think it's a great. I mean, it's a very good classic cuvee. I think a lot of vintage wines would be pleased to achieve this beautiful mouthfeel, lovely aromas.
Yeah,
it's a very well balanced. Yeah, it's a good wine, and you do pick up on the attention to detail that you guys make.
Yeah, thank you. Would you be okay to move on to the next wine?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
Blanc de Blanc, you'd say.
Blanc, yeah?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Voila.
Okay.
Voila, indeed.
This one's alive. Wow.
So I just wanted to check the lot code with you, actually, and then we can look it up together in a moment. So it should be L13BB, and then.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, L13BB 4781D05. Does that sound right?
Great. Yep. So we'll pull that up. In a moment. So Blanc de Blanc is for us 100% Chardonnay. So Chardonnay being the only white grape that we grow, our Blanc de Blanc is always 100% Chardonnay. It's also a vintage wine for us. So we're tasting the 2013 example this year. We always do our Blanc de Blanc as a vintage wine, and it's a fascinating one to taste in that respect, because Chardonnay, I mean, it's a grape that we absolutely love, both personally and generally at Nyetimber. But Chardonnay is a fantastic grape for sparkling wine, because it shows so clearly for example, the flavors that come from the lees aging. We'll come on to that, but also clear as a bell, the flavors and the characteristics from the season. So of all the wines that Nyetimber produces, we do some multi-vintage, some vintage dated wines, but I think none of our vintage dated wines shows the season better than Chardonnay. So it's a fascinating wine to taste in that context. Here we're showing off the 2013 season, which was, I'd say, a classical English vintage that from midsummer through to harvest time, very cool, dry, so a long ripening period. And actually the wines were quite quiet. Cherie tells the story sometimes of when we were tasting the juices and the early wines, looking at each other thinking, I don't quite know what we have here. I mean, everything's correct and as it should be, but the wines are just they're so quiet. They're not really sharing their characters with us. And it was, when you have the experience and having been through it before, we knew that, okay, with some patience, something is going to reveal itself. And when the 13s finally did unfurl, they were slow to do so. You needed a lot of patience, but what we've got is something very beautiful, crystalline, very, very fine boned, and we're really, really happy with where the 13s are. It's also viticulturally a nice milestone, because it's the first Blanc de Blanc that includes Chardonnay from our Hampshire sites as well. So we have, okay, for the first time, both green sand and Chardonnay, chalk grown Chardonnay in the mix. And
so how old were the vines when you decided to include them?
They would have been majority 4th year at the point that they were included. We did actually have some fruit before. Actually, I should say it was a mixture of 4 and 5, but we did actually have a small amount of fruit before that, but it was a very, very, very tiny amount from Hampshire before 2013. So not significant enough. And yeah, we only got a little taster of what that fruit would be like.
I think
so, go ahead, Guy.
No. All I was going to say was, I mean, again, a lovely wine. I think there's a really nice balance within it, and a lot of the fruit, as you're saying, really draws out, especially the terrific characters within it. It's, yeah, as you say, a vintage wine, which sometimes can be a bit risky, but despite the methods that you guys go through, and a particularly good summer, it's great.
Yeah. We'll just share the screen for the technical information. It gives me another opportunity to talk about my bugbear. One of the things about as much as I said, a multi-vintage wine is a multi-vintage wine and not a wine from one year, or could be from one year like a non-vintage is. For a vintage dated wine, we feel also that a vintage dated wine should be what it says on the tin. So if it says 2013, then you can be assured that at Nyetimber, it will be 100% from 2013. You are allowed by EU law, and many producers utilize the very generous percentage of reserve wines that can be used in a vintage dated wine, but that's always felt kind of opposite cheating? To the, well, I wouldn't say cheating, just sort of kind of confused and maybe misses the point of why it's vintage dated. So it's just not a philosophy that we hold. So we feel like, look, if it says 2013, it should be from 2013. Sure. Some things are best kept simple, I would say. and the same is true for grape variety. You can put technically you can put a bit of Pinot Noir in a Blanc de Blanc, but You won't ever see that from Nyetimber. So I think that's all we need to share for the Blanc de Blanc, which means we can move on to Tillington, actually, since we were just talking about Tillington. And in fact, Brad and I just came from there, so kind of fun for us to try the wine right after we've been at the site.
Brad, I presume this has another number that you would like?
Yes, please.
Is it, just remind me, will it start with L, is that right?
That's right. So it should be L13TG and then.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
2581
258.
B for Bravo 08.
Okay, got it.
Is that okay?
Yep, that's perfect. Makes sense. I'll load that up shortly.
So this is just before you guys get going. So I recently took on board the Tillington, which I think Brad, you and I were in touch with a few months ago. And if I remember correctly, I know you guys will go through, but you only meant this in particular years. Is that right? When the quality's there, so it's a bit more of a, if you can get it sort of wine. It's not necessarily what's going to be there.
Yeah, Tillington. I mean, it's so fun having just been there again today. But because you know, you can't help but think back to where everything began. And this wine began by Brad and I being out in the vineyard, having, you know, pre-harvest routines that we have of going into the vineyard and checking how things are going. And in that year, we were tasting some fruit in the vineyard, and I was in one set of Pinot Noir rows, and Brad was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 rows over. And I was partway down the road tasting this fruit, and I was like, "Oh, Brad, are you trying this fruit?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's amazing." So we were sort of kind of calling to each other across the rows, and really excited about this Pinot Noir, because it wasn't that it was necessarily better than all the other Pinot Noirs we'd ever tried, but it was excellent quality, and it was unique. It had a unique character that was different to the other Pinot Noirs. And that was really exciting for us. And anyway, since of our 11 different vineyards, within those vineyards, we have all these little sub parcels of different sections. There's well over 100 different sub parcels now. Yeah. Since we keep each one of those sub parcels separate through the winemaking process, we were able to watch this parcel of Pinot Noir from Tillington at each stage. And at each stage went, wow, this is great. So at blending time, we just said, look, we've got to make something from this. We ultimately chose to blend a very significant amount of Pinot Noir together with Chardonnay from the same site, because the Pinot Noir on its own is, I mean, it's rich, it's big, it's a voluptuous type of a grape. And we always feel that the Chardonnay kind of reins it in a bit and keeps it in check, almost acting a bit like seasoning in a way, where it helps some of the pure flavors pop through, but also doesn't allow it to become too heavy for what is the Nyetimber style.
Yeah, a lot of people refer to Chardonnay as like the finesse. It's, you know, it's that quality that gives a wine what you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, Tillington is, as a wine, is there to show off the amazing Pinot from this small parcel within the estate, but the Chardonnay is doing a very necessary job, just that it shows its best. It's 20. This particular one is 24% Chardonnay, so 76-24. All from the 2013 harvest, 100%. But we don't make Tillington every year. So we do a vintage Tillington. I mean, as you said, but we do a vintage Tillington when that special character shines through in the Pinot Noir.
Yeah, Pinot Noir is very true to its chameleon reputation, that it can be, for reasons that aren't always clear, quite different from one year to the next. And so since our Tillington, the characters of the Tillington, we're very much looking for those really unique special flavors. In some years, we just don't get it. So we choose to not make the Tillington in those years.
I think what I find most appealing about this wine, apart from the exclusivity, should we say, it's not available every year, mouth, the beautiful silky texture, really well achieved and balanced. It's lovely.
That's what we love about it too. And that's one of the hallmarks of that Pinot Noir. It just, you know, people often ask, well, why not just do it as a Blanc de Noir, 100% Pinot? But I think that there's two things there. When you're working with 100% Pinot in a Blanc de Noir, the risk is that it becomes, I'd say almost like chewy on the palate. You lose that sense of silkiness that makes sparkling wine just such a joy. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we don't like to go up to 100% Pinot for the Tillington, is we want to leave that ability for Chardonnay to just create nice edges to the wine, shall I say. Yeah, I think I've lost my train of thought, but hopefully that made sense.
Absolutely, it's a great wine, and I think as we're discussing, the main elements that I pick on it is the balance. I think that comes from what you're talking about, is the focus. It's very much a precision-based wine. And that is very evident.
Yeah. And sorry, that's what I was going to say. That's one of the other things about this Pinot Noir from Tillington that's so special is, you know, if we took Pinot Noir from another area and we made a wine to the same percent of Pinot Noir, so, you know, sort of just below 80% Pinot Noir, I don't think we would end up with the same texture, because some of that beautiful texture is Tillington. It's something about that site that brings that. So it's it's as I said, it's great that you guys have picked up on that. That is the terroir from that area, and you know, it's shows getting out in the vineyard, buying the grapes, paid off.
It's really, you know, it's interesting in that perspective as well, because so Tillington is overall as a property, it's 37 hectares. It's a reasonable sized vineyard, but it's only Pinot Noir from one little portion of the site that is not eligible, but gives the character that we want for Tillington. So it's not that, you know, from anywhere on the property. It's this one particular portion that we go to. And unusually, so Tillington, like all of our sites, is a south-facing slope. And what's really unusual about this is that this special Pinot is at the bottom of the slope. So if you're reading about, you know, reading textbooks about viticulture, normally it's the top of the slope, you know, mid-slope, or top of the slope is where all the good stuff comes from. But just, you know, by tasting, we found this, you know, unassuming set of Pinot vines down at the bottom that just gives something amazing. And you know, there's technical features that you know about a grapevine, so the rootstock, the clone, etc., the basic soil characteristics that it's planted in. There are matching rootstock clone combinations elsewhere on the property that don't give the same character. So there's just, that's part, you know, the sort of artistic side of wine it gives us these flavors that we love, even though on paper there ought to be others that can do the same. Other vines that can do the same, they don't. So it's just down to taste.
But as you say, I mean, circling back to what you guys were saying, it's the importance of getting out there, trying the vine, you know, the grapes on the vines, and seeing which part of your terroir works. And you have to come up with something rather unique. So
I mean, it is fair to say, as much as it's the bottom of the slope, it's still a slope. You know, sometimes people you may have in mind, like certain areas of France, the bottom of the slope is actually a flat. It is still a slope. It's just interesting that it's not the top part. Where it is. It's a pretty beautiful site. So.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one.
Show the technical. So just to quickly show the screen, where we'll put. Brad's just going to pull that up now. But one thing to say about the Tillington is we've always not seen this wine as the wines in our portfolio that are going to be the really long agers. you know, we just tasted the Blanc de Blanc, and the very first wine made at Nyetimber was in 1992, and it was it was a Blanc de Blanc in 92, and it's over 30 years old now. And Blanc de Blanc just has this incredible ability to age, as do blends that are very purposely made to have long aging. The Tillington, we always kind of enjoy it a little bit. I mean, not young. It's not ever. It's always going to have around at least 3 years on leaves before it comes out. But within the Nyetimber context, a little bit on the younger side, just so that you really see that beautiful fruit that we're getting from the vineyard. So on this screen sharing, you can see the amount of time from bottling to disgorging is.
Oh, sorry, Guy. I just realized I'm not sharing.
Oh. Here I am talking about the screen. Yeah, there we go. So you can see from the bottling in early spring of 2014 till similar time in 2018. This one had a little bit longer on these than 3 years, but not as long as some of our longest aging wines will do.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. I think we can taste some rosé.
Rosé, yeah.
On my end, the sun has just come out, which seems even more appropriate that we're on to rosé.
Yeah.
I'll get it for you.
So is it nice up where you guys are then? You haven't had these storms that you were saying?
No, we did have some storms. Today's the first sunny weather in a few days now. So.
Yeah, we did have quite a lot of rain yesterday, but today's been really clear. I think we just. Yeah, it was a designated day for us to go out to the vineyard, so we were pretty lucky.
We were really lucky. Yeah, we were going to be out there no matter what, so thankful for the sun.
We packed all the rain. Yeah.
I'm sure you guys are familiar. Everybody's thankful for the sun in England.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So rosé. So of course we're moving into a different color spectrum now, per definition. But actually, I think it's always something that I like to say that a rosé for us isn't just about color. If it was, it would be you could do like some producers do choose to do, take something like your classic cuvée, add a little bit of red to it, and there you go, you've got a pink color. But really, why have a rosé? Well, it's the opportunity to really express flavors and textures that bring this intensity of red fruit that you just can't get in a white-based sparkling. And that affords a lot of different flavors. It affords different food pairing, etc., etc. So I think it's one that Brad and I we also really like making it because it's fun. It's a fun wine to make. So yeah, we really enjoy it. I guess we need your lot code again, though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So this one will be LRSMV and then the unique bit.
0802102.
Open up. So your, I think, will be 2016 based. Rosé, just check here. There we go. Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So you can see here, it's still a blend of the 3 grape varieties. Pinot Meunier always plays a smaller role in rosé for us. Pinot Meunier has this really vibrant fruitiness to it. Rosé already, by the method of how you make rosé, is quite fruity. So we're careful with the Pinot Meunier to not go too high, or it can be over the top. It can just be a bit too much. So we like Pinot Meunier, but it typically will stay under about 5%. And it is a multi-vintage wine, but again, because we're really searching for that lovely fresh red fruit type flavors in the wine, we tend to have the reserve wine used in the multi-vintage not be as old or as deep. So in the Classic Cuvée, for example, we had reserve wines going back to 2009. And in this wine here, based on 2016, the reserve wine only comes from 1 year prior. And that tends to be how we like to work for our rosé. Keep the reserve on the quite fresh side.
Yeah. I think that will suit the wine better as well, because you want to have the intensity and the burst of the red fruit. So,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And we always like this wine too, because with a rosé, you know, ideally, if you didn't know what you were drinking today and you had black glasses that you couldn't even see the wine, that you would know just by smell and taste alone that it was a rosé. And one of the taste elements that is part of the DNA of a rosé is that it has more, it's a little texturally stronger. So it's going to have a little bit more of that drying. I mean, technically it's phenols. It's like a tannin type character that will be in the wine.
Yeah.
And that's actually really helpful when it comes to certain elements of the food pairing that we do. So it's part of the pleasure of a rosé.
Well, and as you said, it helps cut through, because you know, you could have that with something that's got a lot more a creamy textured dish, because it would hold its own. There's a bit more of an edge and body, and as you say, it cuts through a slightly fatty element, which some sparkling wines wouldn't. But that's part of it. That's why you make the different wines.
Yeah. People often also feel that the rosé is a little bit less. The acidity in the rosé is also a little bit lower, and technically that's not always the case, but the way it feels on the palate can often be that way. So it's just that little bit rounder texture than you know, the Blanc de Blanc, for example, has that very precise acidity without being too high or too sharp, but it's very definitely a precision to the acidity.
I think that's a benefit to having this rosé. You do want the smoothness, and that's what it brings. It with a nice wraparound feeling of the tongue, and you get the red berries. So it's an important element. I agree that is happening, and you know, I'm pleased that you have the distinction, because you want that to go on within the wine.
Yeah. I mean, we're very blessed in England that we have naturally high acidity, and we have to keep it in balance. It is possible to have too much acidity and make the wine harder to drink than it should be. But that lovely freshness that we can achieve in this country is special, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's what England's getting known for, as you guys know, is the crisp freshness of the wine.
Yeah. As long as it's balanced, I think that's a useful part of a top quality traditional method sparkling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that
acidity for acidity's sake, but yeah.
Yeah, if it's all acid, that's not good either. So it has to walk this right line. So
it's something you guys have mentioned quite a bit today, that it is balance, isn't it? It's finding what works and why you found a packaging in the vineyard where you can use the sparkling wine and so forth. So it is that blending process with the winemaker's input.
It probably sounds really simple, but actually it's really challenging. You know, Guy, if I think about it, if we decided to create a style that hung its hat, as it were, on high acidity, that would be actually kind of easy. What we're trying to achieve is it sounds simple, but it's harder than it sounds in the execution.
I think that's where I'm going to say winemaker was fighting with the elements and the terroir, but that's the important part that you sell, that you will bring, is how do I want to make the wine that I want to make? These are the ingredients that I've got. These are the grapes, the terroir, and so forth. Yeah, I completely agree. But it's that balance.
Yeah.
Great.
One more.
Cherie. Yeah. Speaking of food, the wine that we made specifically because of food pairing. Yeah, we'll get some.
So is this the Cuvée Cherie, is that right?
Yes, please.
Hey, Brad, do you want your lot number?
Yep, fire away. Thank you. So DSMV and then.
So 2591A03.
Okay.
Excellent. So this wine, we're going back to Chardonnay for, and that's because with this wine, there is a higher level of sweetness in the wine. And when you have a wine that has some sweetness in it, it needs a balancing component. You know, just like when you make lemonade, if it's all sugar, it's not very nice without the lemon, and vice versa. You don't want the lemon without the sugar. So it's finding that that balance point. And of the 3 grapes we grow, Chardonnay has this, it just has that, as we were saying, this wonderful linear purity of acidity to it that makes working with it for a wine like this really, really a pleasure. And in fact, our inspiration for this wine it came from the great German Rieslings of the world, where they walk this incredible line of crystallinity of acidity, but sweetness, but without being cloying. And it makes such a fun wine for having with food.
I think that's the key point. Sorry to get there, Andrew, but as you're saying, the cloyingness, you have to be careful because sometimes it gets too much. And it's not a nice texture, it's not a nice feeling.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, carry on.
It's something we're very conscious of, because ever since we released this wine, which actually we never intended to release it, which we can tell you about, but we have so many customers that buy this wine to drink all on its own. And when we sit down to do blending of this wine, Brad and I are always conscious that how will this be on its own without the food? It was created because we wanted to be able to food pair with it, but and to use it with light desserts. And also it's worked really well for us with certain types of Asian cuisine that just are harder work with the brut wine. You know, we love Vietnamese food, for example, with all those herbs and things in it, and this works really, really nicely.
So it stands up to the punch, because that type of food is very ferocious is the wrong word, but it does pack a punch, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we still have to be careful. So if you think like Thai, you know, certain Thai food, for example, there's so much chili in that. No, it's not going to stand up to something really strong. But you know, I always think of you know, some of the flavors that you would find in there's Vietnamese salads that they've got these herbs in it, and there's that can work beautifully. It's not really hot in the mouth, but there is more spiciness from the different herbs and
those sort of aromatic dishes really get a lift from the bubbles, and it makes a really nice synergy. And if the spice isn't too strong, then the sweetness balances, and it's really we had sweet courses in mind when we first came up with the Cuvée Cherie, the demi-sec, but it's found a second home at you know, savory main courses with some Asian cuisine.
Yeah, we're finding some top sort of Michelin restaurants that focus on that type of cuisine are gravitating towards this wine as their choice. But I mean,
what a great surprise.
Yeah, well, especially, you know, there's a lot of us that we love so many different types of food. It's not fair to pick one, but you know, we do really like a Vietnamese
if there is one,
food.
on fairly heavy rotation, then that would be at our place. Yeah. So, and
as you said, it's a very nice turn up for the book, so that's happened.
Yeah. But we did, as Cherie alluded to earlier, the original idea for it became Cuvée Cherie. It started life just being called demi-sec, but the original idea for this wine was simply because we love having, you know, we've mentioned food and all 3 of us talked about food pairing all through this this tasting, but we love having our sparkling wines at the table. And the one place where we didn't really have a good option was with the dessert course. And when we do Nyetimber dinners, sommeliers would, not having any other choice, take the classic cuvee, which served as aperitif, and it would reappear with the dessert course. And then you've got a dry wine and a sweet dessert, and doesn't do either any favors. So we created the first bit of demi-sec just by the, in a few dozen at a time, to be able to have just an unlabeled bottle to take to the dinner, and we can pair with the dessert course when we're doing Nyetimber evenings. And this one of those problems that's good to have, I guess, is that people, coming up to us afterwards saying, not talking about any of the other wines, just where can I get that demi? Okay. So yeah, we need to find a label for this, and it's got to become a proper thing. And Demi-Sec was born, and then a couple of years later it became Cuvée Cherie now.
Yeah. How's it being received? Because it is a different take to go down as winemakers, especially everything that we've been discussed.
It was, we were definitely swimming upstream, launching a demi-sec at the time that we did in 2012, 2013, when everyone's talking about zero dosage and low dosage. But the thing is that people's impression, I guess, of demi-sec has been tainted by a lot of bad examples. So where people who just read about the demi-sec or hear about the demi-sec or Cuvée Cherie now don't automatically gravitate to it, but when people have a chance to taste it, they love it. They love it. So we pour when people come to our open days at the vineyard, they get a tour of the vineyard and then have a chance to do a tasting, and they'll try a few wines, including Cuvée Cherie. At that tasting, at those sessions, people have the chance to buy wine at the end, and Cuvée Cherie ends up as, usually classic cuvee sells best, but then Cuvée Cherie is normally number 2. And that's not nearly the same out in the open market, just at wine shops and things like that, where people don't instinctively go for demi-sec, probably because of bad experiences in the past. But once they get a chance to try it, and I think also why it works so well at restaurants is because the sommelier can include it as a wine flight. And so people are learning about it by tasting it. It's really successful.
I think it's also part of the difficulty with the naming of the category demi-sec, and hence why we've moved away from just calling it demi-sec and we now call it Cuvée Cherie, because there's this idea, understandably, when people hear sweetness, your mind immediately goes to things like a sweet sherry, a rich port, a sauterne, a Canadian ice wine, a German ice wine, and those are really sweet. Like they're
bodies as well.
Luscious,
almost viscous,
really sweet. Whereas, just to throw some numbers out there, those wines. So a brut wine can have up to around 12 grams of residual sugar per liter. A sweet sauterne, a Canadian ice wine, they can be 120 plus grams per liter, whereas a demi-sec sits somewhere in around 40-ish. So it's more than brut, but it's not a really sweet wine. You could never put this with sticky toffee pudding. It's not that sweet, but it has enough sweetness that it makes this ability to work with the light desserts really, really nicely. So fresh fruit, light pastry, it's just, it's a joy.
I think it'd be really interesting, and this actually reminds me of the dinner that we had with you. I think beetroot, like sweet beetroot, I think it'd be lovely. But it's the textures that you get from wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us to the end of the 5 wines that we had with you today, Guy. Is there any other area we can particularly talk about that you think would be useful?
I don't think so. I mean, there's so much, but lots of content, which is great to be able to use that. I don't think so. I mean, obviously we can do a fair bit of editing, but what about future plans? We haven't discussed too much of that, have we, for yourselves and for Nyetimber?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's different elements of future plans. So From the wine side, as a business, we mentioned before, we're very committed to only using fruit from vineyards we own. And what that means is, as a business, to grow, we have to buy land in order to continue to grow. So what other producers will do is they will, maybe plant one vineyard and then they'll buy in fruit to be able to grow. But what that means is we do continue to buy land when something comes up that is, super exciting and we can't really pass it up.
Yeah.
And hence why our most recent planting this year, we did a planting in Kent to bring us up to the 327. So there'll probably be a little bit more planting over the years as time goes on. You're always kind of projecting many years out, because from the time you put the vine in the ground to when you have a wine to sell can be sort of 8 years, for example. So you have to think, where are you going to be?
Yeah.
Quite a ways down the road. And I guess the other real side is export.
Yeah, I think that's the next main sort of phase for Nyetimber for growth is to develop the export market. I think there's still a lot of work to do in the UK. I think for English wine overall, a lot of people are still trying it for the first time. Although we've seen some numbers that an incredible number of people in 2019 from the UK tasted English sparkling wine for the first time. So I think it is moving out into the mainstream. Something like 1 million people, I think, tried an English wine for the first time in the UK last year.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, really, it's turning the page, or turning the corner from known amongst wine lovers into more mainstream, just people who drink wine casually, without knowing that it's 37% Pinot Noir and grown on X, Y, and Z soil and rootstock. Just drink it because it's delicious and they like it. But so there's still work to do in the UK, but export is the next big challenge. I think if we look at, I was in New York at the beginning of February this year, and actually the reception was incredible in the trade. So many people coming up saying, "I'm so excited to taste Nyetimber and to taste English wine because I've heard so much about it and I've never seen a bottle in person. It's just so rare. I can't wait to try it." But be outside the trade, then you rewind back to what it was like, in London 10, 12 years ago, that the average person would have no idea that we even have vines in England, let alone, the quality and the ambition that we've achieved. So.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's great.